Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the second event of the Winter Quarter series for the South Asia Working Group here at the Stanford Center for South Asia. The title of today's event is Influence of Haram Never Goes Away, Dignity, Genealogy, Virtue for Anti-Blasphemy Activists in Pakistan by Saad Lakhani. Before we move on to the speaker introduction and the talk itself, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Paras Arora, and I am a second-year PhD student here at the Stanford Department of Anthropology. And along with Shubhangini Gupta, I am the South Asia Working Group Fellow here at the Stanford Center for South Asia. The Stanford South Asia Working Group is a graduate student-led community building effort, which was spearheaded by Shubhangini herself and Shantanu Nevrekar in the year 2020, in order to create a space for dialogue, community, and reflection for students and scholars engaged in South Asia and South Asian research. We have had a multiplicity of events ranging from graduate student presentations like the one today to writing workshops and to panel discussions. And we are quite excited to have Saad with us today. Before I give the spotlight to Shubhangini to introduce Saad, I would like to recognize that Stanford is an occupier of the ancestral and unceded land of the Muwekma-Ohlone tribe. We are grateful to be guests on this land and commit to solidarity with Indigenous struggles. With that, over to Shubhangini to introduce Saad and today's talk.
Thank you so much, Paras. Lovely to share this platform with you, as always. So I will just go ahead and talk about our speaker for today, our very own Saad Lakhani from the Department of Anthropology at Stanford University. So Saad is a PhD candidate in cultural and social anthropology at Stanford University. He's interested in the anthropology of sovereignty, dignity, masculinity, social class, populism, and religion. His research examines the relationship between social class, gender, and religion through the lens of the everyday politics and public culture of religious offense-taking and giving in Pakistan. In his recently completed ethnographic fieldwork, he focused on how several Islamic groups articulated and contested how Muslims should respond to what they saw as a general crisis of blasphemy in the contemporary world. He will be building upon that research and talking about an aspect of that today, especially with respect to the PLP, an Islamic group based out of Pakistan. Before joining Stanford, Saad received an MA with distinction in social and political thought from the University of Warwick in the US and in the UK, I apologize, and a BS in social sciences from Shahid Zulfikar Ali Bhutto Institute of Science and Technology in Pakistan. So thank you so much for joining us today, Saad. And just before I give the floor to you to really hear your lovely presentation, for our attendees today, thank you for coming in and joining from all parts of the world. This is a webinar, as you may observe, and therefore, if you have any questions for Saad as the presentation is going on, and especially post the presentation when we open the floor for questions and answers, please put them in the Q&A box right below your Zoom screen. And I would request everybody to keep their questions respectful and just try and build on the conversation in a constructive and polite manner. Thank you very much. With that, Saad, on to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shubhangini and Paras, for the introduction. Thank you, the South Asian Working Group at Stanford and the Center of South Asia for hosting this event. I'd like to begin by a disclaimer and also trigger warning. This work is based on sections of a chapter that's very much a work in progress, so feedback is very much welcome. The other thing is, like, I'm gonna quote a lot of terrible stuff, so a lot of cost slurs, so this just keep that in mind. A lot of this stuff that my interlocutors will talk about. So let me start this presentation. Let me share the screen first. Okay. Can we see the screen? Okay. So I'll start this presentation by introducing the TLP. A working class anti-blasphemy movement in Pakistan. In 2011, Salman Taseer, the governor of Punjab, was assassinated by his security guard Mumtaz Qadri for advocating the reform of Pakistan's blasphemy laws. This event prompted various religious groups affiliated with the Barelvi sect, the predominant Sunni Muslim sect in Pakistan that venerates Sufi shrines, to form a political coalition demanding the release of Mumtaz Qadri, also a Barelvi. Qadri was declared a Ghazi, a term meaning successful warrior, and historically used for kings, conquerors, and saints. The Free Mumtaz Qadri movement was officially launched in 2013. By 2016, many prominent Barelvi groups had left the alliance, but three groups led by popular clerics, Khadim Rizvi, Ashraf Jalali, and Afzal Qadri, founded the Tehreek Labbaik Ya Rasulallah. The name means the movement of the slogan, "We are here, O Prophet of God." It was later shortened to Tehreek Labbaik Pakistan, or the movement of the Labbaik slogan Pakistan. TLP claims that the slogan was chanted by Mumtaz Qadri immediately after killing Salman Taseer. The TLP was founded by resentful, small-time Barelvi clerics. The mosque cleric has historically been a subordinated marginal religious actor in Punjab. Historically, the cleric served landed chiefs and shrine custodians as a low-status subordinate individual. The urban cleric today relies mostly on neighborhood donations and gets paid very little. Most well-funded and better organized Barelvi religious movements led by the middle classes also continue to marginalize the mosque cleric. The TLP's rise in recent years has to do with its ability to mobilize working class young men who, like Barelvi mosque clerics, share a general class resentment for the middle classes, shrine custodians, and other big men who take respect, quote, but do not give respect. So now I turn more directly to the topic at hand. The invocation of haramness and the valorization of halalness is central to the political culture of the TLP. TLP members often spoke of not only being true Muslims, but also truly halali people. While halali literally means that someone's birth did not involve haram conduct or adultery, it is also used to imply that a person is loyal and indebted to the hands that feed them. Invoking both meanings, the TLP links halalness with demonstrating loyalty and devotion to Prophet Muhammad as the ultimate patron of humanity. This presentation is my attempt to make sense of this constant invocation of halalness in TLP political activism. So I'm gonna show you a couple of short videos, kind of TikTok videos that are just to give you guys a sense of like what I'm talking about. What's people who know Urdu and Punjabi would be more familiar with this.
जेठ दा सूरज रत्ता लगदा है हाड़ महीना तत्ता लगदा है हाय हाय हलाली जब नारे नाल पत्ता
मैं फख्र से कहता हूं मैं बरेलवी हूं। कहते हैं बरेलवी का क्या मतलब होता है? मैंने कहा हलाली बच्चा हलाल। कुरान पे ने जी तर्जुमे वाले जेड़ा संगी मर्जी उसे जेदा तर्जुमा पढ़ना। पारा नंबर 29 सूरह कलम, रब ने फरमाया उतुल लिल बाद सालिक ज़नीम, फरमाया महबूब जेड़ा तेरा गुस्ताख है वो हराम। बस जी कुरान पढ़ रहे हैं उतुल लिल बाद सालिक ज़नीम, बस ये कहना है सजा रब सजाए असल है कि दी असल है वो हराम है। हलाली बंदा हुजूर की गुस्ताखी नहीं कर सकता, हलाली बंदा अहले बैत की गुस्ताखी नहीं कर सकता, हलाली बंदा सहाबा की गुस्ताखी नहीं कर सकता, हलाली बंदा दाता साहब की गुस्ताखी नहीं।
So what these videos were kind of, these videos are very common videos like these are viral videos. You can see in on TLP WhatsApp groups, these are like, shared every day. What these videos say is, being a blasphemer will always be a haram born. A TLP member is, or a Barelvi is always a halal born. So we see that this kind of connection between being halal born and haram born are very much connected with being a supporter or being against the TLP. Okay, so in the Islamic ethical tradition, halal and haram refer to the permissible and impermissible respectively. They determine the limits of ethical conduct. Haram must be avoided, but halal is not a virtue in itself. It is the bare minimum that one must do to remain legitimately Islamic. However, in everyday parlance in Pakistan, halalness also refers to certain qualities of a person. It especially refers to someone who eats halal, earns halal, and engages in halal sexuality. To borrow the phrase from Muslim American dating culture, halal Muslims keep it halal, where it means consumption, production, and reproduction. Associating with people who do not keep it halal threatens one's halal credentials. Whole communities and lineages may be considered tainted by haram. If someone keeps it halal, then they have a valid claim to respect and dignity. People in Pakistan often say that you must respect social religious superiors, but it is also common to say that one must respect someone because they do not engage in haram forms of work, which also implies haram dietary and sexual practices. Given that occupation historically implies caste, the phrase may also mean that the person does not belong to a disreputable community. So in the summer of 2009, Asia Noreen, a poor Christian woman, was picking falsa berries in the Ethan Valley village in Punjab. Her boss asked her to collect water, and her co-workers refused to drink from the water that she had brought. They told her that she had contaminated and polluted the water. She had made it haram due to her Christian faith. An argument took place, harsh words were exchanged. Later, two of the Muslim women, with the help of a local mosque cleric, had Noreen arrested and charged for making blasphemous remarks against Prophet Muhammad, a capital offense in Pakistan. Salman Taseer had publicly expressed his support for Asia, and his murder prompted the rise of the TLP. But Noreen's case also reveals an intersection at which the practice of caste untouchability meets the politics of anti-blasphemy in Pakistan. Most Christians in Pakistan come from the stigmatized Chura community, the traditional sweeper caste policed by taboos of untouchability and disgust. Several scholars have remarked how blasphemy accusations against Christians in Pakistan are intimately linked with caste discrimination. Muslims in Pakistan generally do disavow caste discrimination, yet they also justify it through distinctly Islamic idioms. For example, the first accusation that was levied against Noreen was that she had turned the water haram, ritually impure and forbidden for her Muslim colleagues. A chief justification for caste untouchability is that members of the victimized community do not distinguish between haram and halal. Despite the events that followed, Noreen's case largely conforms with a structural pattern of blasphemy accusations. According to Sana Ashraf, who has carried out extensive ethnographic research on blasphemy accusations on the ground tend to stem from the breakdown of interpersonal relationships. The victim is usually known by the accuser. They are also usually socially vulnerable, subordinate individuals in terms of religion, caste, gender. The original conflict begins as a perceived transgression of a social hierarchy. This is true of Asia's case as well. The matter tends to escalate once the local mosque cleric gets involved and brings blasphemy charges, etc. According to Ashraf, the most common theme across accusations is an anxiety about the sexual purity of women. She even notes sexuality and blasphemy appear so connected that many of her informants said with much conviction that a blasphemer must be of illegitimate birth, a haram born. Blasphemy accusations indeed reflect a desire to purify the social body by weeding out symbolic transgression and pollution. I add, this process of purification is also an assertion of many ordinary people to assert their dignity and respect through the idiom of halal and haram. The negation of haram goes hand in hand with the valorization of halal. Halalification, I propose, is the process by which Muslims in Pakistan demand recognition of their dignity and respect, asserting their fundamental validity and legitimacy as Muslims. Popular blasphemy politics, which is now led by the TLP, has connected halalness as a validity and legitimacy of belonging with the imperative to demonstrate one's loyalty and devotion to Prophet Muhammad. Halalification is related but different from what scholars have called ashrafization, or the process by which Muslims assert their status by referring to the distinction of their person, their families, their communities, and ancestors. A Sharif Muslim or a distinguished Muslim must also first be a halal Muslim or a valid Muslim, because ritual purity and legitimate birth necessarily precede virtue and noble genealogy. While halalness may not confer social distinction, it does infer moral validity. An individual of halal birth whose family and person have not been found to consume haram items or engage in haram practices and professions has a valid right to assert their dignity as a legitimate person. So when Mumtaz Qadri was hanged in 2016, the TLP leadership was extremely frustrated that the mainstream media was focusing on the recent death of Abdul Sattar Eidi, a prominent social worker instead. The TLP leader Khadim Rizvi called Eidi a fake saint being glorified by the media. He claimed that Eidi was not worthy of respect because he begged on the streets to collect money for his foundation. He then used his haram money earned through begging to raise haram children. He was referring to the fact that Eidi's foundation provided shelter to abandoned orphans. If there is a real saint, he said, it is Ali Hajweri, considered the patron saint of Lahore, who has been feeding genuinely halal-born people at his shrine for centuries. Rizvi's controversial comments were widely condemned, but they were rooted in a tradition of imagining Sufi saints as the protectors and validators of people's dignity. My interlocutors often said that Sufi saints protected people's dignity by putting a veil on their secret transgressions and sins. There's also a tradition of claiming that Sufi saints protect people's dignity by validating their halal origins. For example, Hanif Qureshi, the cleric who inspired Mumtaz Qadri, says in a speech that lovers of the descendants of the Prophet, referring to the Sayyid caste in Pakistan, and the Prophet's family are necessarily halal-born individuals. Quoting a venerable authority, he says that only people with halal blood can love Sayyids. Looking at the audience, he said, why are your faces all gloomy? Sharminda, Sharminda. Enliven them, make them tabinda, tabinda. Rejoice if you are here singing anthems of Ali's and his children's glory and greatness, then it confirms that the name of your father on your identity card is not formal but real. By declaring our love for Ali, we are validating the truth of our doctrine and our descent. Oh, fellow lovers of Ali, your glowing faces say that you are halal born. The belief is that Sufi saints can validate a person's halalness based on knowledge of the unseen, but Barelvi scholars also claim that haramness can be identified by certain behavioral symptoms, tendencies, that is the tendency to disrespect sacred beings. They build on a verse from the Quran calling an opponent of the Prophet, Walid bin Mughira, a child of adultery. Claiming this insult was due to Walid committing blasphemy, they argue that a blasphemer must necessarily be haram born. Building on this verse, Irfan Shah, a prominent Sufi Pir, mentions a story about a child who casually ran into the teaching hall of Abu Hanifa, a revered Islamic saint, to collect a ball. Abu Hanifa told his students that the child must be haram born because anybody who shows jurrat or daring in the company of pious and pure beings must have haram origins. Blasphemy is thus a symptom of haram origin. The word jurrat in this context implies a negative, carefree, and daring attitude. It is also the term that many TLP activists use for Khadim Rizvi. They say that he is a man of jurrat, or courage, who can call out and insult men of great power. For them, this shows that Khadim Rizvi is the true mujahid in the sense of someone who speaks truth against a tyrant. One of my interlocutors once told me that the most appealing part about Khadim Rizvi was that he courageously insulted vadde se vadda admi, the biggest of big men, even a man like Trump, the big shot president of America. He giggled before saying, he called him a chura for insulting the Prophet, the caste slur. Deen Muhammad further said, Khadim Rizvi even said, oh Modi, I'll take off your dhoti pants, you drigger of cow urine. And he also, and then he explained, you see, it takes guts to say this about a big prime minister of a country in front of a public crowd. He gave further examples. He said, Khadim Rizvi straight up called Imran Khan a kanjar, another caste slur, and haram zada, meaning bastard, for making women dance in Israelis. And he told Tahir al-Qadri, who's a respected Barelvi scholar, that he is a pig, pimp, and Christian pastor for speaking against Mumtaz Qadri after getting dollars from the West. So for many TLP activists, the adventure of TLP lies in gaining this license to curse big men, whether they are enemies like Trump and Modi, but also even Barelvi religious leaders who they otherwise show great deference towards. It is true that vulnerable groups are most victimized by the TLP, but the discursive targets of TLP are always social elites, respectable groups. Two specific groups stand out as local targets of the TLP's opposition: shrine custodians and the pious middle classes. Shrine custodians realize this. They know that they believe that the TLP is a movement led by uppity mosque clerics, exploiting popular sentiments around blasphemy to get the Barelvi mosques to revolt against them. In 2020, a group of shrine custodians mobilized against Ashraf Jalali, one of the founders of TLP, to get him arrested for blasphemy against the Prophet's daughter. Irfan Shah, who is leading this group, publicly insulted Ashraf Jalali in an event organized and chaired by Punjab's leading shrine custodians, calling him many things, among also caste slurs. He quoted a hadith stating that a blasphemer must be haram born, and in a hall full of laughter, he sang the lyrics of a vulgar song. Oh, sweetie, he said Jalali should ask his mother, oh, sweetie, where were you all night? So the Barelvi community did not see these comments as mere insults, but serious accusations. Irfan Shah personally knows Jalali's family. They grew up together in the village of Bikki Sharif. Their breakup reveals a broader tug of war between clerics and shrine custodians for the leadership of the Barelvi community. Irfan Shah's saintly family have been historical patterns of Ashraf Jalali's clerical family in the village. Irfan Shah's father was the Sufi Pir of Jalali. Jalali has earned an independent name for himself. However, as a champion of the Sunni masses or the Sunni Awam in Lahore, he represents a version of Barelvi Islam that quietly dissenters without rejecting the shrine and the Sufi Pir in favor of the mosque and the religious scholar. The TLP threatens the leadership of people like Irfan Shah by demanding them to also demonstrate their loyalty to the Prophet. One of the top TLP clerics, Hassan Raza Naqshbandi, said, I say with great confidence that all the world's peers cannot equal the tip of the shoe of one member of our movement. If you cannot speak up for the dignity of the Prophet, then you are nobody. When a peer objected to Hassan Raza's allegedly blasphemous words, he doubled down, saying that a mujahid never regrets speaking the truth. If a peer has stood guard for the Prophet's honor, then I am obligated to show deference towards them. Otherwise, they are nobody. But almost by definition, the peer's authority should be based on unconditional loyalty and submission. TLP's radical intervention in Barelvi religious life thus lies in invoking truth-speaking jihad to call into question the peer's own devotion to the Prophet Muhammad. In one speech, Irfan Shah thus insulted the leadership of TLP for questioning the loyalty of prominent Sayyid-born peers like himself. He says, who are these newcomers who are doing propaganda against Sayyids? We are the ones who taught them how to walk. They have grown up so much that they question us today. Should we now go to Churas, the counselor, to get certificates about people's dignity? Who are you to question us? You, Churas, again, do you know who we are? Do you even know who you are speaking to? We are the children of the Prophet. We are the ones to issue certificates about people. Has the time come that Churas will issue certificates? Has the day come for people to go to Churas to buy perfume? For Irfan Shah, Sayyids and peers have the right to issue certificates about the dignity of people. In contrast, Khatam Rizvi often said in his speeches, people ask us who is a Barelvi. A Barelvi is a halal-born child. Halal birth is not identified by a certificate, but by one's habits. And our habit is to stand guard for the Prophet's honor. In this respect, the TLP actively positions itself as halal-born by rejecting the right of Sufi peers to declare someone halal and haram. In fact, they demand peers to prove their halalness as well, to demonstrating their loyalty to Prophet Muhammad. Another object of TLP's critique is often the para likha classes, the educated ones or the middle classes, who are often called the munafiqs of our time, the hypocrites of our time. In one speech, the Barelvi cleric Kokab Nurani connects the Walid bin Mughira story with the para likha classes. And he says that they think that they are pious and civilized and so on, but in reality, they support people like Salman Taseer, another para likha. This clause, he says, supports blasphemers, which means that their respectability rests on falsehood. They too must have haram origins. After all, the influence of haram never goes away. While they are known for their respect and their dignity today, he says they will also be brought to a state of zillat or utter humiliation. And who was Mumtaz Qadri? He said, an ordinary security guard, yet millions attended his funeral. Shirafat or sharifness, translated as nobility and respect worthiness, is a long-standing and widespread Islamic principle of social and moral distinction in South Asia. The word sharif, meaning noble, exalted, originates in pre-Islamic Arabia, referring to free men distinguished due to their illustrious ancestors or their own achievements. In many Muslim societies, the ashraf, plural for sharif, refers to the descendants of the Prophet. In South Asia, ashraf classically referred to communities claiming foreign descent. This included Sayyids, putative descendants of the Prophet, Sheikhs claiming Arab descent, Mughals claiming Turk descent, Pathans claiming Afghan descent. Indian Muslim rulers supported this aristocracy since at least the 13th century through land grants and political offices, excluding low-status Indian converts. Sufi peers of Ashraf birth have historically attracted greater followers and received state patronage. The Ashraf express class distinction and pride as for being more authentic Muslims, for being more Sharia-minded compared to local converts. In the post-colonial period, without a state instituting the Ashraf with states and statuses, claims of Sharaf origin multiplied. Many scholars have noted how low-status butchers and weavers claimed Arab ancestries. It is still common in Pakistan for communities to claim descent from noble ancestors. For these groups, genealogical claim-making is certainly about social aspiration and mobility. However, recent scholarship also shows that these claim-makings are also about imagining an Islamic past with a view to asserting the capacity for ethical striving in the future. At the same time, scholars have also noted how the new middle classes and socially mobile groups adopt piety around notions of authentic scriptural Islam to assert social distinction and status. Both scriptural piety and genealogical claim-making can be understood as part of the process of ashrafization. Both are distinct means of imagining a return to the time of noble Muslims of the past to assert one's Islamic distinction in this world and the next. The genealogical and the ethical are thus not different but connected domains. Ethical action implicates others in the present and future and presupposes the consequences of the ethical actions of others in the past. My interlocutors often told me a myth about the lizard zat or species or caste. They said that God disgraced the lizard zat after one lizard ancestor accidentally blew into a fire that the king Namrud set up to threaten Prophet Ibrahim. Today, lizards are in a state of indignity, they say. It is not only a virtue to kill them, one interlocutor told me, but people do it with their chappals, their sandals. This story reveals that the unethical actions of one especially careless ancestor can have disastrous consequences in the present. Even the Ashraf imagine themselves to have fallen into a state of zillat after the loss of Muslim power. As Akbar Zaidi notes, the Ashraf agreed on one thing: God had taken away their dignity, their izzat, and put them in a state of utter zillat because they no longer possess the distinctions and virtues of their ancestors. My interlocutors often spoke of stigmatized castes as giri hui zat or fallen castes, implying that their current humiliation must have something to do with a transgressive ancestor. Dalit Muslim castes also sometimes narrate origin stories of fallenness. Joel Lee, for example, has discussed the case of the Dalit Muslim caste Halal-khor in India. The word Halal-khor means someone who earns a halal living or eats halal. He discusses how many of the origin stories of the community imply foreign descent, Arab, Persian, and Turk, to explain their state of fallenness. However, these stories are rarely used to assert social status based on noble ancestry. This may have to do with the impossible social distance that has to be crossed for halal khors to assert sharif status. But instead, halal khors assert their dignity and respect not through sharif distinction, but by appealing to the dignity of their honest halal labor. Joel Lee shares an anecdote where one of his interlocutors told him that he found two Sayyids bickering over who was a genuine Sayyid. The halal khor man asked them to become halal khor instead. No Sharif Muslim can disavow their halal status. The ideology of Sharif respectability is often presented as the ashraf who have it and the rest who don't. We may speak, however, of three categories. The sharifs who assert surplus dignity based on social and moral distinctions, the halals who demand a recognition for their basic dignity as Islamically valid people, and haram deemed people who are denied dignity. A sharif person is necessarily a halal person, but without sharif prestige and power, the dignity of a halal person is on shaky grounds. They have two options: to become sharif or seek the patronage of a sharif person. For many ordinary people, the patronage of a big man is thus the most realistic way to secure their dignity. In everyday Pakistani speech, halalness thus implies loyalty to a patron. One may be halal or haram in relation to their salt. This implies loyalty or disloyalty to the hands that feed you, the patron. Many Sufi shrines display bowls of salt for visitors. Eating a pinch of salt ritually signals loyalty to the saint as a patron. To be haram in one's bones, had haram, implies sluggishness in work. The idiom goes that haram consumption leads to haramness in one's bones, which in turn leads to dissuasion from hard, honest work. One is thus at risk of becoming a haram khor or a haram earner, usually a term usually used for disreputable people like pimps and thieves. Much worse is to be haram in one's blood, a haram zada, a harami, implying a permanent and irredeemable genetic inheritance. In this backdrop, TLP activists link halalness with proven loyalty to the ultimate patron of mankind, Prophet Muhammad. There is thus an egalitarian thrust to TLP's politics, claiming that all social distinctions are in suspense and everybody, big and small, must demonstrate their halalness by standing guard for the Prophet's honor. I will now discuss the lifelong struggles of one TLP activist struggling to find dignity in his life. I met Rizwan regularly at his his used auto rickshaw shop in Lahore. He worked in Dubai for many years as a construction worker, allowing him to open his shop. Before that, he hustled and toiled for much of his life as an auto rickshaw driver. Describing this period as one of constant humiliation and precarity, he had joined the TLP quite recently, in November 2020, after attending the funeral of Khadim Rizvi, who had passed away reportedly due to COVID-19. He described himself as a lifelong political loyalist of the PMN and party before this period. He also defined much of his life through the prisms of his struggles, trying to become more virtuous by associating with the Dawat Islami piety movement. "How can I serve you?" he asked me when we first met. I told him my interest in studying Brahvi groups and especially the TLP. What can I say about the TLP other than the slogan, "Only they will have dignity who speak up for the dignity of the Prophet"? For the next 4 hours, he spoke little about the TLP, but a lot about his lifelong struggles and failures to earn respect and dignity. The Dawat Islami was especially close to his heart. It helped him, he said, curb the aggression and anger of his early youth. If TLP taught me jihad, he said, then Dawat Islami taught me aman or peace. Dawat Islami taught him to respect elders. Everybody was surprised, he said, to see the positive change in him, kissing his parents' hands and behaving like a sharif man. Then he paused and added, "You know, people say you are putting on a show, but as Dawat Islami taught us, you may show off in the beginning, but it will eventually transform into sincere conduct." Rizwan was ambivalent about this axiom, to say the least. He used to be a fashionable young man, he said, shaving his beard and keeping a pistol. He lacked manners and was rude to everybody. He offered cheap rickshaw rides on his unregistered rickshaw, where he always carried a baseball bat looking for fights. Dawat Islami changed him entirely, and everybody was pleasantly surprised. But then he remarked that they also constantly made fun of him, calling him a big Molvi. Rizwan told me the Shariat is a blessing for the poor man. It allows him to save face and keep his dignity, his izzat. If he does not have the money for a big wedding for his daughter, that he can refer to Shariat. But then he qualified the statement. He said, but of course the poor man must be known to be observant of Shariat. Otherwise people will say, oh, when it was time to spend money, he remembered Islam. Then he added, if you are observant, then you can reference Islam with confidence. After a pause, he said, but you know what, Saad bhai, people still make fun. They always do. God gave me guidance at his time. Who are you to say anything about me? Nobody gives a hungry man bread, but everybody rushes to mock him. Rizwan's efforts to become a good Muslim and shed off his image as an uncouth youth were met with frustrations and failure in the form of constant ridicule and mockery. He once told me that he tried to make his wife observe proper Islamic veiling in his extended family household. Dawud Islami had taught him that a woman has dignity in Islam and must observe veiling from her male in-laws and must be given a separate room, kitchen, and bathroom from the rest of the family. But when he talked to his family, they ridiculed him and his wife. They said, according to Rizwan, they taunted him. They said, oh sweetie has become a Maulvi. And to his wife, they said, oh, look at this little goat. Is she some fairy from heaven? Does she think she is a princess? Have we brought her from a Sayyid family's house? Rizwan's desire for pious change was also shaped by his desire for social mobility and respectability, a desire constantly met with disappointment. To earn dignity and respect, Rizwan also tried forming social relationships with the big men of a major political party. He described himself as a Jiala of the PMLN. In Pakistani political nomenclature, a Jiala refers to an ordinary activist showing self-sacrifice and unconditional loyalty beyond utilitarian reason. He told me that he knew Saad Rafiq, a prominent politician, face to face. He never took money for political work like others. He said, he emphasized that his relationship with the big men, Chaudhrys, Chaudhry is a word for landed chiefs and also for big men, was based on sincerity and affection rather than naked self-interest. He told me, you know, if a man takes the good path, the biggest Chaudhrys will eventually listen to your request. If you give respect, then you get respect. If you turn to anger, then even the smallest beggar will not do what you ask. If you approach people with sincere love and virtuous conduct, then even the biggest gangster will give in at some point. Virtuous conduct is very powerful. The Prophet spread Islam through virtuous conduct. But despite his virtuous conduct, pure from greed and self-interest, the big men never seemed to listen to his request. Despite emphasizing the non-transactional nature of this relationship, he expected some reciprocity. He was one of those workers who constantly gave sacrifices, yet only received disappointment in return. Slowly and gradually, he said, he grew disheartened about this one-sided relationship. For Rizwan, the TLP represents a movement radically at odds with the political culture of big men. While all the major parties were about self-promotion, the TLP was about something nobler, bigger, and more sublime than everyday hierarchies and concerns. Before joining TLP, he said, he had a jealous grudge, bughaz in his heart. He'd say, Khadim Rizvi is a Baba who uses foul language. He never reflected on why the Baba uses foul language. Everything changed when Rizwan attended Khadim Rizvi's funeral, where he was mesmerized by the miracle of seeing millions upon millions of people, he said. He thought to himself, wait, an ordinary disabled cleric of a small street mosque and a funeral with millions of people who genuinely respect and love him, the Baba must have done something right. Some people told him that they came from Mirpur. Oh, so you were already visiting Lahore, he asked. No, they said, they came specifically for the funeral. Did someone offer you a ride? He asked. No, they spent their own money. He then asked, what rishta or relation do you have with this Baba? No rishta, they said. Rizwan was struck by the realization that the worldwide respect achieved by Khadim Rizvi was not based on material motive or social relation, but on genuine respect and affection. It was the real deal. Rizwan realized that God blessed Khadim Rizvi with real dignity, not the temporal and temporary fame of your run-of-the-mill big man. He witnessed other miracles too, like the name of the prophet in clouds, and realized that God was telling him to join the movement. The discussion changed when a rickshaw driver entered the shop. When he left, Rizwan said, you know, I've learned there is great barakat or divine prosperity in halal rizq. Rizq means one's predestined material goods in life. For Rizwan, one's rizq is written in fate and cannot change by choosing haram over halal means of earning. But if we earn haram, we end up consuming our predestined bread and butter while our future generations are destroyed. He said, look at me, an ordinary rickshaw driver who God has given dignity. The whole rickshaw community of Lahore knows me today. I have no shortage of things. He noticed me taking field notes. All these notes, he said, are irrelevant. Only one point is worth writing down. Only those will have dignity who speak about the dignity of the Prophet. For Rizwan, this prophet formula, condensing many elements of his self-narrative and worldview, which he repeated endlessly, promised genuine dignity to ordinary people in this world and the next. He offered himself as proof. Look at him today. His father always fed him halal and he always earned halal. Today he is respected. But the truest example of the promise of the prophet formula was Khadim Rizvi, he said. This was because Khadim Rizvi was a truth-speaking mujahid who held even the biggest chaudhris to account. I told him it wasn't clear how this claim to honest earning was linked to Rizvi's honest speech. He added, my heart says that there is barakat or divine prosperity in truthful speech. He further said that one cannot change one's fate, but one can be truthful about choosing halal over haram. But then he said that if God wanted to change one's fate, God gives people the capacity to do good over bad. He remained undecided about the role of human agency in God's pre-decisions, but he insisted that we must trust in God's plan and be hopeful. The prophet formula offered hope. God's plan offered hope. How can big people otherwise respectfully get away with corruption and transgression while ordinary people are constantly humiliated for the smallest things? He told me, God's plan never stops for no one. We have big, short, big people, bare log, king people, Badshah log like Nawaz Sharif. We will call him a king, right? Where is he now? In jail? Where is Benazir assassinated? Where is Musharraf in exile? Where is Ziaul Haq assassinated? They were the kings of their times, but where are they? But how have they fallen today? They are zalil, humiliated. The same will happen to the king of Kanjars, a caster again, our Prime Minister Imran Khan. Rizwan's broader perspective was that genuine respect cannot be achieved through the naked pursuit of money, but only through sincere devotion to higher beings and through displays of religious honor. We were talking one day about a TLP banner that said, we don't need the economy, we need religious honor. The economy will get better by itself. I asked him, why would he use this banner to ask for votes in a working class neighborhood? It only means, he said, we value dignity, izzat, over money. He went on to explain that money without dignity is useless. Let's say that we have money, he said, but our daughter is dancing in public, or if I sit home and enjoy my time while my wife goes out to work. What is the benefit of money if you lose dignity? You cannot become kanjar. They have no dignity. Rizwan then explained the other half of the statement, the economy will get better by itself, by maintaining that the arduous path of earning money through halal means is always worth the effort because it comes with dignity and durability. Money earned through haram is always satisfying in the short term, but it wreaks havoc in the long term. Whole generations get destroyed by eating haram. Ultimately, he said, it is always a choice to earn money through haram or halal means, but if we earn our already predestined wealth through haram means, we will destroy ourselves and our future generations in this world and the next. Rizwan then immediately jumped to a discussion of sexuality, asserting that haram sex is always easier but more disastrous than halal sex. Around the world, adultery, he said, is being made easier than marriage. What is the difference between the two? Islam has made adultery haram and marriage halal. Otherwise, the act is the same. The difference is you will protect your dignity through nikah and your faith for your future generations and yourself. After Rizwan joined the TLP, he had many arguments with people about Khadim Rizvi's foul language. He explained to me, if I verbally abuse your mother, what would you do? You'll say, I will cut off your head. Now the Prophet is the life of our lives. If somebody says something inappropriate about the honor of the Prophet and commits blasphemy against it, then we will cut that person into pieces. If one's basic sense of male honor demanded that one fall into a state of anger and rage, calling for violent action, when someone insulted their parents, then in Rizwan's view, it was only logical that one's rage be greater when someone insulted the Prophet, the ultimate source of the dignity of our parents. Rizwan then told me about a debate he had with a fellow rickshaw union leader. The union leader said, how can Babaji be a lover of the Prophet when he uses such abusive language? Rizwan told him, if someone mistreats your mother or says something bad to her, and if you don't get angry, then it's questionable if your birth is halal. If you don't get angry at someone who abuses our pure sacred Prophet, and you don't get ready to cut them into pieces, then there are doubts about your birth and faith. Am I wrong? It was still unclear in what sense Rizwan meant that who doesn't rush to defend the Prophet's honor is a haram-born person. Surely he didn't mean it literally, I asked. My point was that if you don't feel anything for the one who led you in this world, Here's the thing. I'm also a father. I also have kids. I do so much for them, whatever is possible. All parents do so much for their child. They don't even see whether it's halal or haram. They fulfill all their child's needs. But if the same child grows up and someone abuses his father, but he doesn't react or feel anything, then the father must also think, this child doesn't look like my child. He continued, whose father says that this is not my child, is a haram child. Then there are doubts about his birth being halal. This is what I meant. When the blood inside you does not boil, when ghairat does not come to you, then surely you cannot have halal blood. Ghairat is an emotional state of rage to protect one's honor. I asked him to elaborate on what he meant by ghairat in this context. See, if you have halal blood inside you, he said, only then you will have ghairat. Wouldn't you feel ashamed if someone disrespects your mother? If you can bear that, then you can bear anything. Then nothing can make you angry. Then I don't have halal blood in me. I don't know whose child I am, which means I'm not halal. In other words, halal blood must boil in one's body to defend its origins. He continued to speak in reference to Lahore's traditional red light district, Hira Mandi. The Hira Mandi here, this area, the Kanjar places where the Kanjars live, what goes on over there? The child's father is not known. The illicit children are born here. Who are they? We don't know if they are halal. The children born in such illicit places, they don't have ghairat. How will they have it? They know of their mother at least, but they still don't care. The Kanjar community is the occupational caste traditionally associated with sex work at Hira Mandi. According to Rizwan, Kanjars naturally lack ghairat because they are indifferent due to the social acceptance of prostitution to what people say about their female kin. Rizwan then summarized this discussion by repeating the Prophet formula once again. The point is simple. Those who will have dignity who speak about the Prophet's dignity. Otherwise, there is nothing. Otherwise, everybody is relevant. However big leader they become, however big scholar they become, if they don't have regards for the Prophet's name and honor, he's not a scholar. We don't follow such a peer. The only peer is the one who follows God and the Prophet. The end. I will end this discussion here.
Thank you so much, Saad, for that very, very rich talk. I think you can stop sharing the screen so that we can all maybe come to the common spotlight forum. And yes, I was just saying, thank you so much for that very rich talk. It speaks to so many of the themes that, of course, are long-standing, not only in the discipline of anthropology, but of course, to religious studies, to moral philosophy, and to even those very interesting ethnographic vignettes about animality, about lizard species. And yeah, it was a very rich talk. I invite the audience to put their questions in the Q&A box. And while we are collecting them, I was maybe wondering if we can get started with a rather banal question, but will help us situate ourselves a little better vis-a-vis your ethnographic context. And that is how exactly blasphemy is kind of referred to in your ethnographic context in local terms. Are there multiple terms in which blasphemy is referred to, and how might it depart from the TLP's invocation of it? And I think that might help us just understand TLP's position vis-a-vis this wider network of ethical striving and ethical experiments better.
Thank you so much. That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, the word that people use, the everyday word that people use is gustaki, which is just a more intensified way of saying beadbi or battamizi. So and these words are very interesting. The word beadbi means someone who doesn't have adab, who doesn't take into account social distinctions. The word battamizi means the same thing literally, right? Battamiz is someone who doesn't make distinctions. Tamiz means to make distinctions, right? Who doesn't honor distinctions. So gustaki is about disrespecting the distinctions that define the difference between superior and inferior, right? So, but the funny thing, I mean, I suppose, is that I mean, gustaki is always, it's this cultural idea of gustaki. It's always in everyday life presented as the kind of ultimate transgression, right? It doesn't have to be in the context of the prophet. It can be in the context of your parents. So you can be a gustach of your parents, of your maternal uncle or whatever. But it's always like kind of, everybody knows that it's presented as the ultimate transgression, but it's always kind of mediated by elders. And, it's just a way to police kind of subordinates. There's this really not super funny joke that one interlocutor told me, where he's like, he learned that I was married, and he was like, let me tell you a wife joke, a wife and lota joke. If you guys are familiar with the lota is the you use it to clean yourself in the bathroom, this water vessel, right? And so he said, let me tell you a wife and lota joke. And then he said, this wife was in the bathroom, and the water in a lota, she ran out of water in a lota, and she didn't want to use the word lota when she wanted to call her husband and say the water in the lota there's no more water, or bring more water. So so instead of saying lota, she said, because she had to speak in her husband in a kind of polite deferential way, she said, the water in the thermos has run out, the thermos, right? And so can you please bring me water in the thermos? And so he started laughing, and I was like, what's the joke, right? And so then he explained, he said, well, what happened was the wife didn't want to give izzat, respect, to the lota, and she ended up doing gustaki, blasphemy of the thermos, right? Because it's kind of, the thermos is kind of an English word. It's supposed to be more prestigious, I guess. I don't know, superior compared to the lota. And so what you have here, firstly is that the gustaki is understood as something that's, the kind of mixing of categories, the lower and the higher, but it's also the humorous element. The reason why he just kind of burst out in laughter was because it's impossible for gustaki is, I mean, it's so impossible to not commit blasphemy, right? Everybody does it, and it's such a pervasive feature of life in Barelvi circles. It's like everybody talks about this. Like this one guy was like, okay, one day I was wearing a green turban and I was running because I was late for my prayer, and this guy was like, you're blaspheming your turban by running, right? By running, you're blaspheming the turban, as a sacred sign. So but there's this sense that it's impossible, and like everybody, and people joke about it all the time, but there's also this tremendous fear about the TLP, which has radicalized this concept of gustaki, right? It's eventually everybody's going to do it, and anything and everything can become gustaki. So there's a lot of fear in the Barelvi community itself about the TLP accusing them of blasphemy, and people would joke about this too. They would be like, okay, so I'm afraid to say anything because some ghazi, some TLP guy would come and say I'm a ghazi, and he's gonna commit violence against me. So yeah, the TLP has very much radicalized this notion. Sorry, that was very long.
No, that was actually very helpful because it speaks to, of course, the inescapability of this, and perhaps also the way in which it's being hegemonized in certain ways by the TLP. We don't have a lot of time for a lot of questions, but there are two very interesting ones, and I was wondering if we could perhaps answer them. Shubhangini?
Yeah, so I think we'll take up Muhammad Nabil Jafri's question. So he says, hi Saad, thank you for sharing your chapter and for fascinating ethnographic vignettes and materials. I have two questions. First, in your dissertation, how do you conceptualize intra-tradition blasphemy allegations, either between Sunnis and Shias or between Sunni maslaks, and its relationship to the rhetoric of halalness? I've observed similar claims in Punjabi Twelver Shia oratory, for example, against Sunnis writ broadly. Secondly, what are the limits of influences of class and geography in the circulation and use of signifiers such as halali and harami? Would parallel processes be observed across other socioeconomic demographics and languages or places within Pakistan? Thank you. That's a pretty loaded, multi-pronged question. So please feel free to answer that and pick up any aspects of it as you see fit.
I mean, okay, I lost the question, but like, yeah, it was, the first part was about Shias and this halalness, this notion is also a very commonplace in Shia circles, and that's true, very much. It's very much true. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's a tradition that's kind of pervasive across, in Punjab at least, it's very pervasive, and it's something that these groups are mobilizing. And they've turned it into, it's pervasive, that's why they turn it into a central part of their identity. The second question was, can you remind me what second question was, what are the limits? Yeah, I mean, it's something that's very much invoked. I mean, I would say, regarding the TLP, it's like, it's very much invoked by working class people, right? But it's also invoked because it's also part of this tradition of imagining saints as validators of halal identity. That's part of it, but it's also like the halalness, the term halalness refers to a sense of loyalty to a patron, right? And there's this, the reason why these people invoke halalness, and the reason why it's so appealing is because what they're saying is these elites have disappointed us. We've tried to earn their respect. They've always failed. And so the only real patron left, the ultimate patron of humanity, is the Prophet Muhammad. And in against his, everybody else's distinctions are irrelevant. And so it's a way of speaking against kind of social elites. Yeah, so it's very much something it's something that the halal haramness theme is often invoked but rarely explained, but people know what it means, right? People know what you're talking about. And it's repeated endlessly. And yeah, it's this sense of loyalty, but also indignity. But it's an idiom of respect and dignity. I think that's the point that I'm trying to convey here. It's a respect of dignity, and a respect that is very different from the kind of traditional way of Muslims asserting their status and respectability, right? Through kind of distinction, whether it's kind of piety, through piety by saying that we have noble ancestors and so on. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much, Saad. I think we are almost at time, just 1 minute left. So we'll close the session and I will hand to Paras to kind of conclude the session and thank everybody, and also tell you more about our upcoming events. I put the link for where you can follow all our work as well as stay updated on what we are up to in the chat box. So yeah, on to you, Paras.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Saad. I'm sorry that we weren't able to deal with all of the questions, but we have a record of them, and perhaps Saad can benefit from them and get back to the people who very generously post them. And our next event for this quarter is going to take place on the 8th of March at 10 a.m. PST, the same time. It's going to be on Zoom, and it's going to be delivered by Karthik Meni, who is a PhD student and researcher at the Department of South Asian Languages and Civilization at the University of Chicago. The title of their talk is going to be Reading Between the Lines, Doing Textual Research on South Asia. The talk will deal with what it means to have a textual interlocutor and what kind of a space the archive is, especially in the context of Sanskrit, Marathi, and Hindi manuscripts. And we're very excited to have you all be present for that talk as well. And as Shubhangini said, we've already posted our social media information in the chat box. And I also want to quickly thank Simrat and Lalita from the Stanford Center for South Asia for always having our back and always having our support. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you once again for our future events. Thank you.
Thank you so much.